Chris Jankow, System Activities Coordinator for the Palm Beach County Library System, and I firmly believe that the poetry and outdoors go together just about as good as pen and paper, and so does the Parks and Rec Department. So we teamed up to offer a blend of appreciation of the outdoors with an appreciation of the poetic form. Because as renowned poet John Keats once said, poetry soothes and emboldens the soul to accept the mystery. Today we're on location at the Okeeheelee Nature Center, where we will learn about the importance of pollinators, take a walk and see the butterfly garden, and hear a lot about the Naturalist app, a perfect tool for recording and identifying nature, while enjoying a selection of poems from the one and only Emily Dickinson.
Hi everybody, my name's Savannah and I'm a naturalist here at Okeeheelee Nature Center. Part of my job as a naturalist is to talk to people about Florida's ecosystem and the amazing diverse wildlife we have right here. Palm Beach County Parks and Recreation is also partnering up with the Parks for Pollinators campaign, which is a national campaign to help raise awareness for our amazing pollinator species. These pollinators help support our ecosystem here in Florida. And along our walk, you guys are gonna learn a little bit about how everything in our ecosystem is connected and how these pollinators play such an important role. Now let's go on a walk as we talk about what a pollinator is. So a pollinator, if you think of that word, you might have some ideas in your mind. You might think about butterflies and bees, and those are great examples of pollinators that you can find right here in Florida, but other animals can be pollinators too. There are mammal species that are pollinators, birds, and reptiles as well. One of the pollinators that we can find right here in Florida is a bat. So here at Okeeheelee Nature Center, we have these structures that we've put up. They're man-made structures, and they support our bat species. A couple of species of bats are pollinators as they drink nectar from plants, and they pollinate along the way. There are other pollinators here that we're gonna hopefully get to see along our walk today. And we're gonna walk through our pine flatwood forest, which is one of the two main ecosystems that you can find here at the park. In our pine flatwood forests, we have lots of different plant species that depend on those pollinators and animals that depend on the pollinators or the plants that they help.
Two poems by the one and only Emily Dickinson to share today. Her poems were mostly published following her death, but one of the best way to access them in our library system is through the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. Anything that she's ever published is collected in this volume. To make it a little bit confusing, she really never assigned a title to many of her poems while she lived. I think less than 10 of the 1,700 that are in here. So scholars and archivists have done their best job to chronologically account for all the poems that she wrote. So they've done their best to just put them in numerical order. Luckily enough though, publishers and other people have, over the years, assigned them titles, so you don't just have to remember the numbers. The first one we'll be sharing today has become known as The Grass, and it's number 333 if you're keeping track. It was first published in 1890, but the earliest manuscript of it was dated to 1862. The grass so little has to do, a sphere of simple green, with only butterflies to brood and bees to entertain, and stir all day to pretty tunes the breezes fetch along, and hold the sunshine in its lap, and bow to everything, and thread the dews all night like pearls, and make itself so fine, a duchess word too common for such a noticing, and even when it dies, to pass in odors so divine, like lowly spices lain to sleep, or spikenards perishing, and then in sovereign barns to dwell, and dream the days away. The grass so little has to do, I wish I were a hay.
What a beautiful poem we just heard by Emily Dickinson. We're going to continue on our walk and talk a little bit about just how important pollinators are in our ecosystem. Like I said earlier, pollinators help plants, and they do this by facilitating or helping the movement of pollen from one part of the plant to the other. This produces berries and seeds and more plants as well. Now here in our awesome pine flatwood forest, we have a lot of different native plant species. But pollinators also help wildlife. So they help the wildlife by facilitating that pollination. The wildlife can depend on the plants that depend on the pollinators for their food. They can also use those plants as places to seek shelter and shade in the hot summer in Florida. And they can also nest and raise their young within these plants as well. So here at Okeeheelee, we have a lot of interpretive wildlife signs along our paths, which help educate people along the way about the wildlife that depends on these pollinators so much. So on this sign, you can see the different signs that tell you that wildlife is all around. Even if you don't see an animal, it's nearby. You can see the tracks of the different animals that hang out here at Okeeheelee. The scat, which is also a word that we use here for species, that will tell you what kind of animals are hiding in the bushes and come out maybe at night or during the day. And you can see molts, or the shedding of animals, like a snake shed hiding in a bush. Now here at Okeeheelee, we are passionate about our wildlife, but pollinators also help people too. Did you guys know that 1 in every 3 bites of food that you eat every day is thanks to a pollinator? Pollinators help 1/3 of our crops here in the US and around the world. And they also help over 75% of all of the flowering plant species too. So these pollinators have such a vital role in our ecosystem, and that's why it's important that we raise awareness like this Parks for Pollinators campaign, and we appreciate them out in nature.
We're back with another poem from Emily Dickinson. This one was first discovered to be manuscripted in 1859 and published in 1890. It's known as The Bee Is Not Afraid of Me, but once again, for reference, the number that it's been assigned is 111. And it does star 2 of the major players in the pollination process, as we're learning, the bee and the butterfly. The bee is not afraid of me. I know the butterfly. The pretty people in the woods receive me cordially. The brooks laugh louder when I come. The breezes madder play. Wherefore mine eye thy silver mists. Wherefore, O summer's day.
That was an awesome poem again by Emily Dickinson that mentioned butterflies and bees. Now, butterflies and bees are 2 examples of the most popular or commonly known pollinators. Like we've been talking about, there's lots of different species of pollinator animals in our ecosystem. And we're going to head over to our butterfly garden, which wraps around the Nature Center and is home to a lot of these butterflies and bees and the other animals that can be pollinators too. Now, this butterfly garden is filled with native plants, which attract these animals. And these native plants are just species that are part of our natural ecosystem here in Florida. Now, that word native means that they weren't brought from anywhere else. They've been here, they're part of that native ecosystem, and therefore they are very helpful and important to a lot of our native species of wildlife.
Time for one more poem here by Emily Dickinson. It's another short one. The manuscript is dated to 1859 and it received publication in 1891. It's become known as With Flowers, and it's number 86, if you're keeping track at home. It's another short one. South winds jostle them. Bumblebees come, hover, hesitate, drink, and are gone. Butterflies pause on their passage, cashmere. I, softly plucking, present them here.
We're here at our butterfly garden, and there's a lot of native plants, just like I mentioned earlier, that support our native pollinator species and other wildlife that hangs around the center. One of those native plants that relies on pollinators is this one right here. It's wild coffee, and it produces these bright red berries and flowers as well, and relies on the pollinators to help it reproduce. A lot of animals then rely on this wild coffee as part of their diet. They either eat the leaves or even the berries that this plant produces. So we're kind of seeing how everything is connected in our ecosystem in some sort of way.
This next poem is Dickinson's 354th. It's also come to be known as Butterfly's Day. It was first published in 1891. From Cancun forth a butterfly, as lady from her door, emerged a summer afternoon, repairing everywhere, without design that I could trace, except to stray abroad. On miscellaneous enterprise, the clovers understood. Her pretty parasol be seen, contracting in a field, where men made hay, then struggling hard, with an opposing cloud. Where parties, phantom as herself, to nowhere seemed to go, in purposeless circumference, as 'twere a tropic show. And notwithstanding bee that worked, and flower that zealous blew, this audience of idleness disdained them from the sky, till sundown crept a steady tide, and men that made the hay, and afternoon and butterfly extinguished in the sea.
As we've been walking around the butterfly garden, we've gotten to see a lot of the beautiful flowers that are here that bloom on our native plants. Again, we have our porterweed, which is a great pollinator plant, and then Jatropha up here, which is a favorite for some of our bees here in Florida. They love hanging around the flowers, and they are awesome pollinators too. There are some more beautiful plants on this side of the garden as well that support our pollinators and attract them. Like this penta, which has these beautiful bright red flowers. And again, those butterflies and other pollinators are attracted to this plant because of those bright flowers. We also have this plant here, which doesn't have any bright flowers at the moment, but it's extremely important to one of our pollinator species, the Attala butterfly. This plant is called the coontie, and for a long time, people thought the Attala butterfly, the butterfly that needs this plant to survive, was no longer in existence. That's because the Attala butterfly uses this coontie as its host plant. This means that it needs and only uses this plant to lay its eggs. When those eggs hatch, the caterpillar feeds on the leaves of this coontie. Unfortunately, the coontie was over-harvested a long time ago, and the Attala butterfly population declined significantly. They didn't think there were any more Attalas around. However, somebody found a population of coontie plants growing on a barrier island off the coast of Miami. They also found, probably guessed it, the Attala butterfly. The Attala butterfly was able to sustain a population on that barrier island because these plants were growing there. So this plant and butterfly relationship is extremely important to the survival of the Attala butterfly species. Now, we plant this coontie all over South Florida, and that Attala butterfly population has been increasing because of that. We understand the important connection between the coontie plant and the Attala butterfly in our ecosystem, which is pretty cool. We support our native pollinators by planting these host plants and other native plants that both the pollinators need to survive and just use as part of their habitat within their ecosystem. In just a moment, we're going to get to hear from one of the volunteers at Okeeheelee Nature Center, Mikey Green. Mikey is part of our volunteer teen program, the Okie Teen Program, and since he's been here, one of his assignments was an introduction to the app iNaturalist. Mikey is passionate about all sorts of wildlife, but especially our insects here in Florida. He's going to talk to you guys about a few of the different pollinators he's been looking for and found during our walk today. He's also going to demonstrate how to use the app iNaturalist so that you all can join us in this effort to raise awareness about our pollinators by using that app and documenting what kinds of animals and plants you can find around your home and your cities.
Hi, I'm Mikey. I'm a volunteer here at the Nature Center, And I was out here while they were walking around talking about the pollinators, actually looking for some pollinators myself to show you. And while a lot of people think of the butterflies and bees as the pollinators, there's also some other pollinators, insects, that live in that habitat back there that are not butterflies or bees and are ones that a lot of people don't pay attention to, like flies and moths. The kind of habitat that I was in was this kind of low, grassy habitat with some nice short wildflowers in it. And it's always a good spot to find grasshoppers, beetles, and most importantly for here, pollinators. So the two really interesting pollinators I found in there were the thin-lined calligrapher fly and the coffee-loving parasta moth. So the thin-lined calligrapher fly is actually a fly, so it's in the same group as houseflies and mosquitoes, but they imitate bees and actually have some of the same habits as bees too. They will pollinate on flowers, and they live just like bees, and the reason they mimic bees so much is that way they don't get attacked by insect-eating predators, because a lot of predators won't go for bees because they can sting. So they think that the hoverflies are also toxic. And the coffee-loving parasta moth is a small kind of moth that's actually diurnal. It's in the Crambidae family, and they're one of the few moths that are pink and yellow, and they like to go underneath leaves, so they fly low to the ground, pollinating on flowers, and then they will perch underneath leaves, so where you can't really see them, even though their colors are bright. Both very cool pollinators that you could find. And if you see a pollinator, a way to get it out there is through the app or website called iNaturalist. So real quick, I'm just going to take a picture of, I think, him perched there on my phone. You can use iNaturalist either through your phone or your computer. I got a nice picture. So once you have your picture, either if you're on your computer, you can open the iNaturalist website. But if you're on your phone, you can use the app. And straight from the app, you can press that plus button, choose your image from your phone, and then if you know what it is, you can type what it is. But if you don't know, the iNaturalist AI will tell you what it thinks it might be. And the first result the AI gave me is actually Macleay's owlfly. So it works very well. And then you just have to put where you saw it, when you saw it, and if it's a pollinator, it will add itself automatically to the Parks for Pollinators event for Palm Beach County, which is very cool, so you don't have to do that. And if it isn't, you can still log any insect or plant or anything you see on there in the wild, and it'll count towards science, which is awesome.
Thank you so much, Mikey. That was awesome. We got to see some really cool pollinators and learn about how to use that app, iNaturalist. Using that app is just one of the ways you can help wildlife, specifically our pollinators, in Florida. A couple other ways you can help our pollinators, which, like we've learned, are very important to our ecosystem, is by planting native plants around your yards, your schools, and in your local community. Finally, the last way you can help is by sharing what you learned today about pollinators and supporting our local parks, like here at Okeeheelee Nature Center. If you get a chance, come on and stop by, walk around our trails, appreciate our awesome butterfly garden, come in the center and meet some of our ambassador animals, learn more about the ecosystem here in Florida, and talk with some of us naturalists and our volunteers. We would love to meet you. Now we're going to hear our last poem for the day for our walk by Chris. He's going to read the last poem by Emily Dickinson.
We have reached the final poem for the day. I've had a great time walking around, learned a lot, and I want to thank the Okeeheelee Nature Center for inviting us in and showing us around. Before we jump into the last poem, I also want to thank you for watching, and we hope that you stay tuned. We have a lot of things in the work, opportunities for you to get a closer look at some of the county's natural areas and parks, all with a healthy dose of poetry sprinkled in between. So stay tuned for more. And with that, I'll leave today with our final poem, Emily Dickinson. This one's come to be known as The Sleeping Flowers. It's number 142. Whose are the little beds, I asked, which in the valleys lie? Some shook their heads, and others smiled, and no one made reply. Perhaps they did not hear, I said. I will inquire again. Whose are the beds, the tiny beds, so thick upon the plain? 'Tis Daisy in the shortest, a little further on, nearest the door to wake the first, little Leontodon. 'Tis Iris, sir, and Aster, Anemone and Bell, Bartzia in the blanket red, and chubby Daffodil. Meanwhile, at many cradles, her busy foot she plied, humming the quaintest lullaby that ever rocked a child. Hush! Epigea wakens. The crocus stirs her lids. Rhodora's cheek is crimson. She's dreaming of the woods. Then turning from them reverent, their bedtime 'tis, she said. The bumblebees will wake them when April woods are red. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.